So how do I play bass lines? Loads of bass players, especially in the beginner stages, struggle to make bass lines. Yes, you can learn bass lines like maybe Another One Bites the Dust, but you find it hard to come up with something which sounds original to you and is something which you enjoy and isn't just a mess of notes. Well, let's get into what makes a great bass line today and how you can make your own great bass lines. Before we even play anything, things which make bass lines sound great is good tone. So make sure you've got your tone dialed in. You're not getting any notes that are sort of fuzzy, and you're getting good, clean, in tune tone across the bass. I'm playing on a fretless, so that's where the in tune stuff applies, but make sure your bass is tuned, of course, because then if you're playing on a fretted, you're not going to be in tune anywhere, because if your tuning's not right. So get a tuner. I've got a tuner on the back of my neck, or you can just get a tuner on your phone or something like that. Get your bass tuned up and make sure your tone is good, applying nice pressure along the strings, that you're not pressing too hard, but you're not pressing too lightly. You get the tone out cleanly, and you've got some good picking technique, because picking cleanly and evenly is the key to success. If you're not up to scratch with this sort of stuff, go and watch my tone video and then come back to this one, because that is really the foundation of what makes bass lines sound good. Then the next thing comes to knowing a little bit of theory, just what a major triad is, a minor triad, a diminished triad, and an augmented triad. And that's basically all you really need to know for starting off. You can learn all sorts of sevens as well, and nine stuff, like you can learn major 9 triad as well, and major 7 sharp 11, and all that sort of stuff. And you get into all of that. I'll leave a PDF down below for some shapes if you want to go through that, but the basic ones are major 7, minor, they're just major triad, even, minor triad, diminished triad, and augmented triad there as well. All with the fingerings in tab and bass clef listed there even. So you want to learn those basic shapes, and it basically gives you some money notes, if you want to call them that, because those shapes you can use anywhere, and that applies over whatever chord you're doing. So let's just make up a chord progression, for instance. Let's say we're in G, and we're going to do a simple 1, 4, 5. Now, if you know what the chords are within the key, the 1 is major, the 4 is major, and the 5 is major. So we're just using that major triad shape for the whole thing, which is sort of convenient, isn't it? And then we can go around and use those major triads. With extensions it changes, because the first 2 are major 7 and the 5 is dominant 7, but that's besides the point. What we want for this example, we're going to use those money notes, and we don't need to make anything that's rhythmically interesting at the moment. We're not focusing on rhythm, we're focusing on notes, and you basically just go and then there's your 1, 4, 5, and that's just filling the bar with 1, 3, 5, 3 for each triad on 1, 3, 5, 3, 1, 3, 5, 3, 1, 3, 5, 3 for each one, and going across and getting all of that stuff and getting the shapes under your fingers. Now it's going to sound a bit basic, perhaps a bit boring and a bit classical. If you're wanting to do some funk bass lines, go watch my funk video for that if you'd rather do some funk bass lines. But it's going to sound a little bit boring at the moment, but no note is going to sound bad. It's just going to sound a bit boring, and that's the thing, because the rhythm is boring, and this is where we want to focus on rhythm. So come up with a rhythmic idea just using those 3 notes, because we don't want to overwhelm ourselves with notes at the beginning. It doesn't matter how many notes you use for each one, but just try and fit one into each bar. I didn't even use all the notes there, I'm just going. I'm not even really using thirds. And technically I'm adding a few cheeky notes in just as open strings, but you don't really need to do that. And that's already a much more interesting bass line. And you can see I'm adding a little bit more notes in there and a sort of fill, which is a little bit diminished-y. But you don't need to necessarily get into that all the way. But once you've got your bass rhythm idea, let's just take this as an example. That's your basic rhythmic idea. Then the next thing I want you to do is fill it out. And you know, things like that in that case won't really work out well, and the rhythm won't be up to scratch. And you know, I do it all the time, and you know, we all do it all the time when we're making and creating new bass lines like this, and you just get better at it over time as you practice. But take an original, a rhythmic idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be original, because in music, really nothing's original. Everyone's done something before. Don't worry about that. Make a rhythmic idea that sounds good to you. This sounds a little bit more interesting than... And you don't have to do it at that speed necessarily. You could really slow it down. And then you can see I can fill it out there, and often it does work nice when it's slowed down. So if you take that rhythmic idea, play around with it, use it around, and that's essentially how I create bass lines, except it depends on style and it depends on context. For a jazz tune, I'm not going to be going around. On a blues, you know, I'd be walking like this. I'd be doing something a little bit more like that, and that's very different. And then, you know, if I was doing something funky, and you know, that's different as well, and it depends on your style. But taking, especially in the early stages, taking a basic rhythmic shape and going around with it, because that like jazz walking blues one isn't really an interesting rhythm. It's just the notes that are a little bit more interesting there, and the note choices and the note harmony. But it's basically this rhythm. It's just, you know, the note choices are different, and there's a lot more notes in it. And that's what makes that bass line interesting. So you can even make your bass line interesting through notes or through rhythm. And especially in the early stages, I always recommend going with rhythm. And most bass lines sound good because of how little notes there are, but just how good, solid and clean the rhythm is, because that is really what matters for a good bass line. For walking jazz, it's different. It's about what the notes are over the chord harmony, but you still need to keep that rigid rhythm. And you could play in two as well. You could change things. And you know, you could use that, but you know, maybe if you want to do a bossa as well. And you can see you can play around with the rhythm like that on such a simple bass line as that one. So just choose some root notes, go around, make a rhythmic idea from it, take those triad shapes. I recommend just a 1, 4, 5, so to start with at least, because they're all that major triad shapes, just one shape. So you find a 1, just any note on the bass, but give yourself a string's worth of leeway upwards. So don't find a note on the G string, start on the E, A or D. I'd recommend something on the E string, because you know you've got all the strings to play with further down. It's easier to play stuff sort of vertically rather than horizontally. For bass lines, it's nice to have lots of strings below and then you simply go up a string to find your 4, and then up 2 frets to find a 5, and you get this sort of little L shape thing, and that's the shape that you can remember in your mind for 1, 4, 5, and then you can create bass lines from that, and you'll be on your way to making some absolutely fantastic bass lines in no time. So I hope that's helped, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.